We are all building a case for something every single day. The question is whether you're building a case for what you want, your possibility, or you're building a case for what you don't want and for why you can't. Welcome to your daily hit of grace and grit, your quick dose of inspiration to kickstart your day. I'm Courtney Townley, and here is today's hit. Here's something I've observed in myself and, of course, in the women that I've worked with over the years. We are remarkably skilled attorneys when it comes to arguing for our limitations. Man, are we good at that. I can't because of my schedule. I tried that before and it didn't work. I've tried everything. That's just not who I am. I've always been this way. I don't have the willpower for that. That works for other people, but that will never work for me. We build these cases with incredible precision. We have evidence, we have history, we have a whole courtroom's worth of justification for why change is not available to us. And the real tragedy is not that those arguments are always wrong, because we do have the evidence. We do have the history. They contain real truth. But the tragedy is that we spend so much time and energy arguing for our limitations that we have nothing left to argue for our possibility. And you can't do both at the same time. That is the great news. You cannot argue for your limitation and your possibility at the same time. You get to argue for one or the other. Now, you can argue for both, but not at the same time. And if any of my clients are listening to this, it will be familiar when you hear me say that if you spend a lot of time arguing for why you can't, or why you shouldn't, or why you don't, I would challenge you to spend an equal amount of time arguing for why you can. Because when we give equal bandwidth to the pros and cons, an interesting thing happens. We start talking ourselves into the work rather than out of it. And I think something that goes alongside this, which I spoke to in an episode earlier this year, is labels. We love to label people. We love to label ourselves because it helps us understand people better. It helps us to understand others better. It helps to understand ourselves better. Labels can be useful. And I know this is a little bit of a sensitive topic, so I want to be careful and really honest here. Again, labels have a place. They can help us better our understanding of something. They can help us understand what we're dealing with, having a name for an experience, finding a community of people who share in that experience. These things have real value. I'm not dismissing that. And I have watched a lot of people use labels as a very compelling argument for their brokenness. The label becomes the reason why nothing can change. It becomes the wall that stops them rather than the door that opens possibility. And I mean, the amount of labels I hear are wide and vast. Sometimes it's things like I'm lazy. I'm not a nice person. I'm not athletic. I'm not a morning person. These sound harmless, but what they often mean is I've decided that this thing is fixed about me, and I'm not open to questioning it. I don't think that's self-knowledge. I think it is self-limitation dressed up as self-awareness. And the same can be true with a more serious diagnosis. So I've worked with a lot of women navigating some very serious diseases. And I'm going to talk more about this actually a few episodes from now, so stay tuned for that. But cancer, Parkinson's, ALS, and a lot of other very serious health challenges. And I've long believed that health is not actually the absence of disease, but it's how we show up in the face of it. Because health is multidimensional. It's not just physical. It's mental, it's emotional. And so how are you showing up within that reality? And I would not have been coaching any of the women with those challenges if I believed that their diagnosis was the final word on what they were capable of. What would be the point, right? So a diagnosis can tell you what you're dealing with, but it doesn't have to tell you who you are at your core. It doesn't have to tell you what you're capable of or what your possibility might be. So what does it actually look like to argue for your possibility? Well, it definitely looks like asking different questions. So rather than why can't I, or why not me, right? You could ask something like, what would have to be true for me to fill in the blank? We often ask questions like, we say statements like, I've never been able to. But I would encourage you to ask more things like, what have I not tried yet? And why not? Again, we say it with such fervor. This is just who I am. But I would really challenge you to ask, is that actually true? Right? Pointing to Byron Katie's work, is that a story that I've been telling myself for so long that it just now feels like truth? When a client says to me something really strong about themselves, like, I've just never been athletic. I'll just never enjoy lifting weights. I'm not a morning person. I don't co-sign on any of that. And I poke at them and say, is that true? Or is what is more true that you just haven't had a practice of doing anything different? And I think the latter is more true. So arguing for your possibility looks like collecting evidence of your capability rather than your limitation. And man, you have just as much of that as you do the other stuff. You just don't highlight it as often. So every time you do a hard thing, you are adding to that evidence. I talk about this a lot. I've shared this a lot in the past, but maybe for newer listeners, you haven't heard this yet. But one of the big identity pieces I rumbled really hard with in my earlier life was that I didn't believe I was good at math, which if you looked at my grades from high school, I actually got really good grades, but I felt like I really struggled with math. I had friends in calculus and advanced math classes. That was not me. So I always felt like I just wasn't a math person. And I was also told by a teacher in high school that I would probably never be someone who worked for herself because I always needed to be told what to do. I just like to do things well, and I wanted information from my teacher on how to do it well. And that was the response I got. And what's interesting about those two things is they kind of haunted me for a really long time. Like I never thought I was good with money because I wasn't good at math. And that wasn't even true. It was just a story I was telling myself. And I, for a long time, longer than probably I should have stayed in the space of working for other people, I didn't work for myself because I had that belief that I had borrowed from someone else that I'm not someone who works for myself because I always need to be told what to do. And yet here we are, 25 years later of being self-employed? Because I challenged the story, right? I was willing to run a different experiment. So here's the simple truth. Your brain will always find evidence for whatever argument you keep making. I'm going to say that again. The brain will always find evidence for whatever argument you keep making. So what are you arguing for? Do you even know? Because if you tell yourself you're broken long enough, you will find proof of that everywhere. If you tell yourself you're capable long enough, you're going to start finding that too. And look, I'm not talking about toxic positivity, right? This is not pretending that the life challenges aren't real. It's simply choosing deliberately and repeatedly which case you're going to build with the time and energy that you have. And I highly recommend you argue for your possibility, why you can, why you must, why you want to, why not you. Not because it's guaranteed, but because it makes life so much more fun, so much more expansive. And really, it's the only argument worth making. So in closing of this episode, I want you to consider one story you've been telling about yourself that might be an argument for your limitation in some way. Just notice it. You don't have to fix it, change it, anything. I just want you to see it and how unuseful it is and what might change for you if you told yourself a different story. If you want a framework for doing this work more deeply, my book, The Consistency Code, is built exactly for this. And you can get a free chapter right now at theconsistencycode.com. Actually, scratch that. It's graceandgrit.com/free chapter. Start there, see if it speaks to you. If this stirred something inside of you, imagine what a whole book of clarity and courage could ignite. The Consistency Code, a midlife woman's guide to deep health and happiness, goes even deeper into the mindset and practices that create real, meaningful change at midlife. Grab your copy today over at theconsistencycode.com and keep the momentum alive.